Hey, before you read about it on Facebook or Twitter, or hear about it from your friends, find out what today's big stories really mean with me, Sean Hannity, today at 2, right here on AM 560, The Answer.
Dan and Amy, so the surprisingly quick, I thought, verdict in the Jason VanDyke case on Friday afternoon. Thankfully, the response was peaceful and, frankly, largely celebratory. Dan Herbert was Jason VanDyke's defense attorney, and he had this to say after the verdict.
We've all heard about the Ferguson effect, and I can only imagine that if police officers think that they can never fire against somebody that is acting the way Laquan McDonald did when they're 12 feet away from them, I think that what we are going to have is police officers are going to become security guards. There will not be a police officer getting out of a car to confront somebody. And maybe that's what everyone wants. I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out.
And that's what I heard all weekend long from my police officer friends, is that they're back into the fetal position. They're not going to risk their not seeing their daughters graduate from high school or walk them down the aisle because of what happened.
Police officers becoming security guards. I got a text from a Chicago police officer friend of mine who said, today is the day that proactive policing died. We'll see, but in terms of the four corners of this case, one thing was clear from the verdict, particularly how quickly it was reached. One, they thought that the first shot fired was unlawful. So much has been made of the 16 shots, but convicted on 16 counts of aggravated battery with a firearm means that he should have never fired in the first place, according to the jury. Number two, from the jurors speaking, some of them after the verdict was announced, they didn't believe Jason VanDyke, so the decision to put him on the stand.
Yeah, they did not like the fact. They said he was too rehearsed. Some didn't believe him. And then there was also the closing arguments. One juror, she was a forewoman, she said that she was upset that Dan Herbert brought race into it.
I don't feel that it did until the end. The statement that was made at the end was wrong to me. The Boy Scout statement. I just didn't feel that was appropriate.
And this was Dan Herbert, the defense attorney.
No, that was really inappropriate. We're past all of that. We didn't come here because of race, or we came here for right and wrong. That's all.
Right, and she was referring to essentially saying Laquan McDonald was no Boy Scout.
Right.
Yeah. All right, for more on the trial and the verdict and the implications, we're pleased to be joined by Dan Herbert, defense attorney for Jason VanDyke. Dan, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Sure. Good morning.
Morning. So let's just start with a big decision for you and the defense team, and that was to put VanDyke on the trial. From what you heard from jurors after the fact about, frankly, they didn't think VanDyke cleared the credibility threshold. Do you regret that decision?
I don't. It's always a difficult decision whether or not to put your client on. At the end of the day, it's your client's decision. But,
right.
Had he not testified, we would have been hearing different things from the jurors, that he must have been guilty because he didn't testify. So, no. The only pause that I had about putting him on is that the case was going in so well for us at the evidence standpoint that, I was careful about not wanting to risk everything by having my client take the stand. But at the end of the day, I don't think he moved the needle one way or the other, but the goal was not to go backwards, and I don't think he did.
Yeah. All weekend long, I've just been praying for him and his family. And how's he doing? I know he's in the Cermak Hospital, so he's not in general population, but what's going to happen?
Well, we're going to wait for sentencing, and we're going to certainly try and get these charges and the verdict dismissed based on a number of factors. But at the end of the day, the worst he should be looking at is, and it is bad, but it's 6 years in jail, which would be at 50%. So 3 years is really what he's looking at, should be looking at.
Really? I mean, even with the 16 counts of 16 counts in which he was convicted for aggravated assault with a firearm?
Yeah, it would have made no difference whether it was one guilty verdict for one count of the ag bat or 16. It's all a single physical act. And same is true with the second-degree murder conviction. The court cannot sentence on both ag bat and second-degree murder, so there's going to have to be one of them will have to be dropped, and it's likely going to be the second-degree murder.
Were you surprised by the verdict, or do you just come to the realization, perhaps, that the video evidence was just not surmountable?
Well, you're right about the latter part of your statement. We know, as we sit here today, that the video evidence was insurmountable because that was the only evidence that the state presented in support of its case. Everything else, I think we won every single day, the defense going into this. And, obviously the goal is not for us to win these days, but it's to not lose. Here the burden was backwards. We came into this case, he was convicted of first-degree murder, and we had to present evidence to get the jury off of first-degree murder, and we did that, even though the outcome was not ideal. That's the reality here.
I loved what you said in your closing statements, that if he would have listened and would have dropped his knife, then he'd still be here today. Because that's true. I mean, he how many calls were there to ask him to please drop the knife before shots were fired?
Oh, there was over 50, I know, 50 times where police officers in full uniform with lights, sirens blaring, and told him to drop his knife. He didn't do it. But here, now, there won't be confrontations for individuals like that. It will be, the police will wait till he gets tired or just gives up or kills somebody. So, we're not going to have these problems in the future, unfortunately. Or fortunately, depending how you look at it.
Yeah. The question that sort of bedeviled me, if I was a juror, I'd want a pretty compelling answer to. From the video, you see, obviously, officers at the scene, and then Jason VanDyke and his partner roll up on the scene. And Jason VanDyke makes the decision to open fire, and no other police officer on the scene did. How do you explain that?
I think Jason VanDyke was put into a situation that really was a perfect storm against him. He got out of that car and he fired quickly, but he got out of the car. He was in a bad position. Part of that was his partner kind of put him in that spot. And, to be quite honest, these other police officers did not contain the situation at all. It was continuing to escalate, and the situation was continuing to get out of control.
What do you mean by his partner put him in that position?
Well, when he pulled up and stopped the squad car, you have to get out of the squad car because that's really the most dangerous place to be in if you're going to be attacked by somebody. So when he jumps out, now he's got the squad car behind him, and he's got Laquan McDonald advancing on him. He didn't have anywhere to get any shielding or turn around and run because he was just in that spot right there confronting him.
So physically, the partner should have established a wider perimeter, is what you're saying?
Yeah, in hindsight, you can look at a lot of different things, but it's like when you pull up on a bank robbery, you don't want to pull up right in front of the door. You always want to give yourself a little bit of room, and that wasn't done here, and that certainly factored into Van Dyke's quick decision.
Well, the issue you just said, Laquan McDonald was advancing on him. From the tape, and this was an interesting part of the testimony that Van Dyke offered as well. He thought he was backpedaling as he was shooting, and clearly the tape shows he wasn't. So that it just goes to kind of his orientation in that moment and how he remembers what went down. So that was interesting, but. The position is Laquan McDonald was advancing on Van Dyke, and what the videotape seems to indicate is that Laquan McDonald was, angling away from Van Dyke, and this is something that a lot of people hung their hat on as well in terms of saying the shoot was bad.
Yeah, and that's why we did our animation recreation where we showed unrebutted evidence that Laquan McDonald was absolutely advancing on Jason VanDyke. He got he went from 39 feet to, I believe it was 13 feet in a matter of seconds. So the notion that he was moving away from Jason VanDyke was simply proven false.
Have you spoken with your client this weekend? How's Jason doing and his family?
You know what? I have not spoken with him. I understand his family was at Mass yesterday. I believe some of his friends and family are going to go see him tomorrow at the county.
FOP, maybe it was Kevin Graham, but I heard a statement over the weekend from Chicago FOP that there's going to be an appeal to the conviction. Is that your understanding? Is that what you're planning?
Yeah, that is my understanding. I mean, there's really a lot of appealable issues here, and I think certainly this the venue issue is the venue issue in the jury instructions. I listened to a lot of the jurors talk about some of the reasoning for voting rendering the verdict that they rendered, and a lot of those were contrary to law. One was that, well, he should have used some less lethal options prior to using his firearm, and that's contrary to law. The law says that police officers do not have to use lesser alternatives. We tried to get a jury instruction on that issue. We were denied.
Well, what do you think it means, too, that they found him not guilty on the police misconduct charge?
I think it's an inconsistent verdict because that they found him not guilty of violating a law while acting as a police officer, but then they found him guilty for violating laws. So it's inconsistent.
Let me ask you this: you had another decision to make prior to the important decision of whether VanDyke testifies on his own behalf or not, and that was jury trial or bench trial. Why jury trial and not bench trial? Do you regret that decision?
We do not regret that decision one bit.
Okay.
Why?
The decision, it was a difficult decision, but it really wasn't for my client. It was difficult for me as a lawyer, but that's another decision that has to be made by the client. And Jason's mindset all along was, I am in this situation because of politics, and I am not going to allow my fate to be decided based upon the same politics. So for him, it was really never an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that. In Cook County, I mean, obviously we know where these judicial nominees and these judges come from, and so the politics of it and consideration by one person in terms of the implications of acquitting him on these charges. So I understand that, and I understand that was a difficult decision. Just kind of generally speaking, you heard the one juror reacting to your mention of Laquan McDonald not being a Boy Scout, and there was much evidence presented at trial that substantiates that claim. But there is, and I hate to Monday morning quarterback you, but I'm sure you're doing it to yourself too. Is there anything that you would have said or done differently in the presentation of the defense for VanDyke?
Honestly, no, nothing of anything major. I mean, I look at every opening, close, witness that I put on, every trial. I always look, say, should I have done this? Should I have done that? And I think that in every situation, I always come up with a couple of things that I think could have been done differently. But honestly, in this case, I really am proud about how this trial was conducted. And despite the guilty verdict here, I think anyone that watches a trial that understands the rule of law will say that we won every single day of that case. And that's what we had to do to get him off this first-degree murder case.
All right. He is Dan Herbert, criminal defense attorney for Jason VanDyke. Dan, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Sure. Take care.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
If you